Welcome back, everybody, to the Justin Thurber Show. As always, I'm your host, Justin Thurber, and my co-host extraordinaire, Jimmy Davis. How are we doing today, Jimmy?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Hey, everyone listening or watching, you really want to hold on to later or skip to the part where we have Dan Fitzgerald, a registrar in Massachusetts, a registrar of voters. Awesome interview. Something I think most people would sit there and kind of be like, yeah, registrar, who cares? But man, it was a fascinating interview. Learned a lot, and actually probably a very important function in our government that not a lot of people know or understand. So it's very interesting, highly recommended, and just listen to that later. So again, what we're going to try to start doing is doing, in case you missed it, where we're going to go over news stories or things that happened around the world that you might have missed in the last week. And this story is about Manchester Public Schools, who told parents who don't like their secrecy policy they can take their kids and leave. And again, this is one of those things that just blow my mind. So I'm going to read some of this article, but what's going on is when your kid goes to school, the schools are sitting there and saying, "Hey, listen, basically your kids are our kids, and we're going to hide things from the parents." So let me read a little bit of this story and we can discuss it. All right, do this. During oral arguments in a lawsuit over its policy of keeping parents in the dock about their children's behavior, the Manchester School District's attorney told the state Supreme Court that parents shouldn't be able to challenge the district's policy. Instead, they should pull their kids out of public school and go somewhere else. If parents want to make a different choice, they can homeschool or they can send their child to a private school. Those are options available to them, said attorney Megan Glynn. The district is being sued over its policy of keeping students' behavior related to sex and gender secrets from their parents. So let me read that. Let me read that again. The district is being sued over its policy of keeping students' behavior related to sex and gender secret from their parents. I mean, like, isn't this things we tell our kids when they're young? Like, hey, listen, your mom and your dad, they're the ones that you go to. Don't talk to strangers about this. The good touching, the bad touching, the not who to talk to. And all of a sudden now your kids go to school and they're like, your parents can't be trusted.
It's funny. It's almost like every week we have an issue related to schooling pop up on the show, and that's not intentional. It's just every week there seems to be another hot button issue that's happening in the school system, which is interesting.
Well, I do have a theory about this, Jim. Um, you know, over the last couple of years, you've seen a lot of pundits out there talking about the rise of a new conservative age and the belief that in a generation or two, 10 to 20 years, that conservatives were going to way outnumber any other party just because of what typically conservatives do. They get married, they have families, 2 or 3 kids, where a lot of other like liberals, Democrats, what they're starting to do, whether it be because of climate change, whether it be because of, you know, they just doing things to their body which stop them from having children. They're not having kids. And I think what happened is when we were sitting here getting excited, like, hey, listen, if we're a rebel, we keep having kids. They sat there and like, oh my gosh, we're gonna be extinct or we're gonna go away. So I think there's been an all-out press to get our kids while they're in the school system. And again, I hate to say this too. I hate to say like it's a money thing too, but they take our money in taxes and we want them to do the right thing, which is educate our kids with a good education. And you know what they do? They take our money and like, we're going to educate your kids and you have no say.
Yeah, and I wonder if they really thought this one through too, because every single town in Massachusetts has a school committee that has elected members to it, and like,
Mm-hmm.
so what does that mean going forward? I mean, that the school committee is a great opportunity for parents that have concerns or anything that their kid brings home, that they can actually speak to the school committee directly and present what's their concerns are, whether they're
Correct.
legitimate or not. It's a great platform for them to to express their feelings. And essentially what this is saying is that there's no purpose for the school committee, or at least that function of the school committee of like listening to parents and how to improve the curriculum is no longer going to be part of what a school committee does. Essentially, they're just going to shut that off to the public. I mean, that would be very concerning in my eyes.
Okay, so again, like you said, there's these themes that seem to be coming out, and again, they're not planned. We're not sitting here like, let's do this. But we've discussed this earlier. One of the reasons why I became a politician or got involved in politics is because when I went to my school committee, I realized they're neutered. You sit there and you're telling them as parents, we don't want these policies. And they're like, oh, that's too bad because this unelected bureaucracy up in Boston sits up there and tells us what we have to do. And you're like, but if that's how it works, then why are we electing you? And again, that's when it opened my eyes to the fact that the government has flipped it 180. They have the illusion that you have a say by voting and by being able to go and talk to these people. But in the end, the people you elect, if they don't have a backbone to push back and fight back against an unelected bureaucracy, what do you got?
That's exactly right.
That's
like a lot of the town committee meetings too, to be honest. It's like you get a forum to present your grief or whatever, you get to gripe in front of the town committee, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really have an impact on the decision. I mean, really, sometimes if all the parents in the town or a huge portion of them stand up at the same time and shoot down an issue, then sometimes it'll have an influence. But for the most part, it's just, if only one or two parents stand up, it pretty much just falls on deaf ears.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I hope that people start realizing and start talking to other people about, and this is the big one that really, really gets me, is the government takes our money through taxes, okay, and then they're supposed to use it for things to help everybody. But what they actually do is they use that money against us. They hold it over us. When you go to a school committee, when you go to a board of selectmen meeting and there's something on there and you're like, hey, listen, I don't want to do this. And like, well, if we don't do this, we don't get this money. And everyone's like, oh, we need that money. Whose money is it? It's our money. What do you... And this is where I have a problem with it. And I think what has to happen, what I love to see happen, is I would love, and we talked, it was funny, we talked to Dan a little bit, after we recorded the video with him, it just, talking about some things. And one of the things that he said, which I think I agree with and you agree with, is a lot of these towns feel isolated. And because they feel isolated, the government loves it, because if you're isolated, you don't feel like you can do anything. And I hope what happens, I hope towns start reaching out to other towns and saying, listen, we don't want to do this. Do you want to do this? And if the other town says, hell no, we don't want to do this. You get 4 or 5 towns telling the government, hey, listen, we're not doing this. It's over.
States did that with the trans athletes in women's sports. A lot of states got together and said, hey, we don't want the NCAA tournament in our state if you're going to be allowing males to compete in women's sports. And, they, instead of one individual state, it was like a combined group of states. So yeah, combined, their voices are a lot louder than individually.
Well, it's not just that. I think what happens, you have 4 or 5 towns that would speak up and tell the state we're not doing this. And then the state goes, oh yeah, well, we're going to withhold funds. You have how many people usually a typical town? 20 to 40,000 people, sometimes more. You have 200,000 or 300,000 people pissed at you. And not only just pissed at you, a lot of those people are going to realize that the state's a lie. How their government is supposed to work is a lie. And they don't want that. They don't want to see like these people are understanding that the process that they thought was in place for their voices to be heard really isn't in place. And if people start noticing that, there's going to be big changes. And I hope they watch this show and I hope they realize that's what's happening, because we need to. So let me keep reading this story, because again, it blows my mind that, like I said, we're going through this and that parents don't get a say. But so Richard Lehman, the attorney for the Manchester mother going by Jane Doe, who filed lawsuit, said parents have the right to know if their children are being socially transitioned in schools with the aid of school staff. And I'm going to tell people out there, this isn't just happening in New Hampshire. This is happening all throughout Massachusetts, all throughout Rhode Island, all throughout Connecticut. It's happening in a lot of schools. Obviously it's happening in California, maybe most blue states and some red states. So, Richard Lehman, the attorney for the Manchester mother going by Jane Doe, who filed a lawsuit. Oh, well, that's the second one. So the real issue is not a school reporting on what a student is doing in school, but for the school to report what the school itself is doing in school. Yes, the school should say, we're doing this. Because I think if more parents found out, like, hey, listen, when your kid comes here and if they're struggling through something, and we're going to support them and hide it from you. And it's funny, I was doing some research on this and I found a funny meme. If they were secretly baptizing kids in school, would people be okay with it? And I wouldn't. As a Christian, I wouldn't. There's no place for that. There's no place for that. There's no place to be hiding transitions from kids. If my kid happened to be anorexic and they're like, listen, I don't want to eat, and they say, okay, we're not going to let you eat in school. No, we don't do that stuff. That's between the parents. And again, I think this is that little bit of encroachment that if we accept this is the other thing. If we accept the government doing this, they're just going to keep taking more and more, and they're trying to replace the parents. And what's happening is you have these people out there that say, hey, listen, my ideas, my beliefs are more important than your parents' ideas and beliefs because your parents' beliefs are dangerous. Well, no. It has to stop. Let me continue reading that. We can talk a little more. Lehman rejected the argument that the lawsuit was an attempt to force the district out of LGBT students to their parents. He argued it's about government entity usurping parental powers and making decisions in place of a parent. Perfect. That's what they want to do. Oh, you're anti this. You're against the LGBT. No, we're not. But the government doesn't have the right to take the place of a parent, and it never should. And this is something that it's unbelievable. We're even at this point in society. So,
wouldn't it be great if schools got back to teaching like science and engineering and math and all these other things? Like these are really where the conversation should be about. But it's like instead we've gone this completely other direction. Now
yes.
We're talking about all this social stuff, which it's.
Well, if here's one of the things we tell our kids, right? If you have to hide something from somebody, it's probably not good.
No.
Let me get to this other part. Here's a wonderful part of this. The policy states teachers and staff are not to tell anyone about a child's gender identity without the express consent of the child. School employees are also directed to use child's biological pronouns and given name when talking about the child to people who do not know about the non-conforming gender identity. So what you're saying is, and here's the thing is, we don't even talk about some of the teachers who don't want to participate in this. Like, I'm sure a bunch of teachers don't want to lie to the parents. They don't want to sit there and be like, hey, Jenny's doing great, but at school she's called Joe and I call her Joe. So, and not only that, but now you're asking teachers to have to sit there with however many kids and what do I call them now? And if the parent calls me up and I have to remember this, like, no, we shouldn't be in the business of having people lie to our kids and our family. It's just disgusting to me. I apologize.
Yeah. Well, how about this? I mean, we have cases too, where when the schools are able to run with this stuff without any sort of transparency. I mean, you have parents showing up at graduation day for high school and they're finding out that their kid is no longer, Johnny, they're now Stephanie at yes. graduation day. And that's happened, and it is happening. And the parent is the person most invested in that child. I mean, throughout their entire life, they know the child the closest, and it just to leave them, to cut them out of the picture completely is just a big mistake.
So really quick, just to finish this up, right? Because it's supposed to be in case you missed it, it's supposed to be kind of quick. There's, like I said, all these underlying themes, and I really like these underlying themes that we have in our shows because we need people to realize there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of bad stuff, but listen to this statement, and I'll bring it back home. On Friday, the Manchester school staff and officials they said they did not lie to the mother about her child's gender identity. They simply followed policy.
That sounds like a cop-out to me.
No, it's not even a cop out, right? This is where my don't outsource your thinking came from. This is where, like I told you, when I sat there and I talked to the school committee and I was telling them, hey, listen, you know, simply following orders is not a good enough excuse. And I hate to say it, the Milgram experiment. People look up the Milgram experiment. We've talked about this before. The Milgram experiment was a psychologist after World War II could not believe that people committed atrocities, and everyone he talked to that of the people that committed these atrocities against other people, when he asked them, how could you do this? They said, I was just following orders. And he's like, bullcrap, that can't happen. You can't tell me that someone told you to commit these atrocities and you did it. And they're like, well, we were following orders. So he did study after study after study. And 80% of the people, if they could outsource their responsibility to position people in position of authorities, or there was a law in place, they would commit atrocities. And this is what we're doing. And this is what we're teaching kids. Oh, just follow orders. No, it's wrong. It's wrong. People have to step up. That's not an excuse. So I hope, like I said, people really look into the Milgram experiment. I think that should be required teaching. I think with all this psychology and stuff we want to teach kids that following orders leads people down a really, really bad path where you do really bad things like committing atrocities or hiding things from parents. So, all right.
I hope some of the parents take them up on their offer to homeschool and go to private school, because I think that's really where it's going to be honest.
Well, here's the thing: is a lot of states, and I'm kind of getting on board with this, are going to start funding students and not school systems.
Yep.
And I don't know if New Hampshire is going to be one. I doubt Massachusetts or Rhode Island will be one. But I think what has to happen is, like, there has to be that process where parents have a right to say, listen, I want my kid just to learn his math, English, science, the social emotional stuff. We didn't have to have all this stuff that you're providing kids. We made out fine. Let them figure it out. And if you can't do that, I will go to a different school. And I think that would be a great thing to do, but who knows? Hopefully, like I said, some states already do it, so maybe they'll have to move to those states.